This is the Fantasy Roadshow.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Roadshow with your boys here. My name is Truck, and I'm joined, as always, by Shane O'Mac. And today we're going to talk about Week 6, red light, green light, players we like, players we don't like, players that have good matchups, bad matchups, all that fun stuff. Shane, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. Real quick, I just would like maybe you give the roadies a little quick summary of the tailgating experience in Chicago last week where you were at.
So yeah, I went to the Bears game, and I will say right now that was the best experience I've ever had at a football game in my entire life.
Wow.
Not only did we go and have a great time at a tailgate with some buddies, Coles and I were sitting in a suite, in the MGM suite, first time being up there. It was unbelievable. We had a nice little buffet set up. We had a fridge stocked full of beer, great bird's eye view of the field. I was a little worried for sitting up so high. I didn't know how good the view was going to be, but it was immaculate. I couldn't have asked for a better day. All of our bets hit, and the Bears ended up playing phenomenally. So I had the time of my life. And I got a new Bears hat too.
Yep, nice. I like that.
Rocking a new cap. But yeah, overall, man, I'll never forget that game.
All right, that was a smash green light week for you then.
Yes, yeah. Actually, we'll talk about our record from last week, but yeah, overall, pretty good week here for the road show. So, but yeah, how was yours? How was your Sunday? I know you were doing the Sunday live without me. I joined in for a little bit, but
it was
good.
Good.
Overall, how'd you do?
Yeah, it was a good Sunday morning. Our guy Peter, I'm sorry, Peter, I recommended Santos from the Bears kicking, and I think he missed an extra point. One of the touchdowns he didn't get, they went for 2, so not the best day.
I think you mean Porter.
Porter, sorry. Yeah, Porter, sorry. I'm getting my Porter, sorry. And then, but Ryan, I came through for Ryan. I recommended picking up and starting Tucker Kraft, so I think that paid off nicely for him.
Yeah, I'd say so, man. Tucker Kraft had himself a day. That's for sure. But yeah, let's get into Week 6, man. A couple teams on buys this week. We got the Miami Dolphins, Minnesota Vikings, Kansas City Chiefs, and Los Angeles Rams. So all those guys are out this week. We got some injuries, some updates. I kind of have a list of I'm just going to run through some stuff going on, some guys that got injured, and then some guys that we're expecting back from injury soon. So Nico Collins, we all saw him get injured. He could be out at 2 weeks this week for sure, possibly next week. Rashee Rice, official season over. You can drop him in season-long fantasy football. Devon Achane had the concussion. He should return next week, but this week is very, very unlikely. Cooper Kupp, we've seen him be out for quite a while. He could come back next week. It's still up in the air, but potential return next week, along with Puka Nacua. So possible return for both, the dynamic duo in LA over there. Aaron Jones had a hip injury. I think it was a hip flexor. He's going to be out an average of 2 weeks. That's what the injury usually says, but this next week for sure. Anthony Richardson should return this week. We saw him out last week. Although if the Colts want to keep winning games or want to be in contention to win games, I feel like you got to have an excuse to keep Richardson off the field for now. You know what I mean? It's just – anyway, A.J. Brown should return this week. He was out. Evan Ingram should return this week. David Njoku had a knee injury, likely to miss this week. I'm not sure who of you is starting him out there, but Jonathan Brooks, his activation from the pup should be coming hopefully this week, probably next week is what I'm hearing. Zach Moss, it says high ankle injury. I didn't see this one too closely, but likely to miss this week, should be back the following week. Jonathan Taylor, his week is to be determined, so we got to follow practice progress. And Derek Carr, oblique injury, expected to miss multiple weeks. And I just saw a report they're thinking about starting Spencer Rattler.
Yeah.
Now, I was a little confused. I didn't know why Rattler wasn't in there at the end of the game.
I don't know either. Yeah, I thought he had
just
that
didn't
number
dress.
2. I thought he had the backup job locked up, but
yeah, maybe he didn't dress or something. But yeah,
Okay.
I'm excited, man. If Spencer Rattler gets in the game, I'm excited to see what he can do. I know he had a lot of preseason hype. So, and then some more news: Robert Saleh officially fired. We saw that today. What's your immediate reaction to that?
I don't have any much of a reaction. I don't know if it's if they're not firing Nathaniel Hackett as offensive coordinator. I don't know if it moves the needle that much.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, it's to me, Hackett being the head coach just means that Aaron Rodgers is now basically the head coach. So
Yeah.
this is Rodgers' team. Let's see what he does with it. I did see that stat. They've scored the same amount of points through the first 5 weeks as they did last year with Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's not the start the Jets have been hoping for, but either way. Let's talk about some takeaways from week 5 before we jump full into week 6. But any takeaways that you got from last week and watching those games?
I think a couple on I think I saw in a lot of leagues of mine, I saw Trevor Lawrence benched. I think he redeemed himself. He bounced back in a nice way. I think we'll talk about it here in a little bit, but Mahomes again with a subpar game. I think this is a trend now. This is not he'll have a 30-point output here in a little bit. The backup running backs, I've been preaching in the Substack waiver wire articles all year. Grab these stashes. The backup running backs came through. Tank Bigsby had a big game. Tyrone Tracy have a big game. It's just grab those guys because they can step in immediately and have great success.
Yeah, it was really cool to see Tyrone Tracy. Coles and I were talking him up early on. I'm talking maybe April, May. We were talking about Tyrone Tracy in underdog drafts. So that was cool to see him shine a little bit. But I have a couple of takeaways from week 5. Brock Bowers, he's just going to be a top fantasy tight end for years to come. This guy is legit. And especially if Devontae Adams leaves, that's what it's looking like right now.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that we should be getting a final destination on that pretty soon. Maybe by the time this episode releases, it is already official. Devontae Adams in a new home. But yeah, Brock Bowers is really good. The Bears keep improving. I know I'm a Bears fan. I know I went to the game, but just fantasy speaking and objectively speaking, the Bears offense has been improving week after week, and it's finally starting to really all come together for them. Shane Waldron is calling good plays, and they're kind of meshing a little bit. Doesn't matter if Stevenson is the starter or not. He is the best running back on the field, and sometimes that's just all you need in order to produce for fantasy. So, and then Justin Fields is not who the Steelers thought he was. Funny how that works out. So I'm thinking we might see Russell Wilson pretty soon. And, I don't know if it's this week or next week, but Fields' days might be numbered in Pittsburgh. They're getting loud over there. And then lastly, Daniel Jones making a case for to be the starting quarterback next year.
Yeah,
he played really good without Malik Neighbors, and Tyrone Tracy played well. That helps, but without your starting running back, without your star wide receiver, you're playing that good. So interesting to see. That's all.
Yep.
All right, Shane, how did you do last week with your red light, green light picks? What are we doing?
So it was a pretty good week, and in the Substack article that comes out Friday or Saturday, where we put in a little bit more DFS plays. I looking at that also. So I was 11 of 15 on green light and red light hits between the show and the Substack. So I think the big hits were for me, was Swift as RB2, Hubbard as RB8. Those were the calls. Mahomes, we both had Mahomes as red light. That was a big red light hit for us. And then I think my biggest miss probably was James Conner. Probably he still ended up somehow without scoring. He cobbled his way. I think it was RB 17 or 16, so still worth the start.
It's because I hope I held out for him.
Yeah, and then me and then I think the other the miss, and I think every fantasy analyst probably misses on this one, was Dontavian Wicks. We all thought this was going to be this breakout game, and it just is not there. That guy.
No Watson, no Dobbs. Wicks had a big game the week before. All the signs were pointing towards him having a good game in a good matchup, but just didn't come to fruition, and that happens. We're on this show. We highlight matchups, right? We highlight matchups we like and matchups we don't like. Players can either put up a dud in a good matchup or overcome, like James Conner you mentioned, in a bad matchup. So you're absolutely right. I didn't have as many picks as you last week. I was 7 for 11. And yes, Mahomes, Swift, big hits for me. Kincaid was also a big hit for me. Tight end 24 on the week. He was on my red light list. Zach Moss, running back 40, was on my list. I got a couple wrong, and I'll be the first to admit it. Drake London I had on my red light list, and that was probably my biggest miss of the entire year. Yeah. He went out and just absolutely went nuclear. So wide receiver 4 on the week, and Drake London. And I missed that one pretty big. So overall, still a good week. Went 7 for 11. I know you did pretty well too. So let's move into week 6. Red light, green light. We'll start with quarterback Shane, of course. Who is your red light quarterback of the week?
Okay, I'm going to just preface this. This is not the Shane O'Mac shocker of the week. So
okay,
and I'm going to add a little context to this. So I want to talk a little bit about Josh Allen. And this is kind of more of a DFS play, or more of a situation. You know, a couple weeks ago, I cautioned against Jonathan Taylor if you had a guy like Chuba Hubbard playing, and Hubbard ended up outscoring Taylor. This is a similar case with Josh Allen, and I think that myself is the prime example. So I'm in a 12-team league where I've got Josh Allen, and then I've got also Jayden Daniels, and I'm going to start Jayden Daniels this week. It's just we've now had, I think, 3 out of 4 games where he's thrown less than 200 yards. This Jets defense is pretty good. They just put the clamps down on the Vikings and Sam Darnold. They held him to, I think, 175 yards throwing in that London game. And he's just got a track record against the Jets. Like over the last 2 years, like he's only averaged like 215 yards, I think, throwing the ball. So there's just a little bit, if you're in a 1 QB league and you don't have a backup, then yes, play him. But if you're playing DFS, or you've got a guy like Jayden Daniels, or even maybe a Jared Goff, that's where I'm plugging him in instead of Josh Allen.
Yeah, you know, I got Allen on my list as well, and I didn't feel great about it. I did not. I mean, he was 9 for 30 last week. Yeah. He went 9 for 30. I remember at the game, I was glancing up at the TV in the suite, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" Like he went 9 for 30. Bad, man. He took a hard hit to his head. Bad. And you saw it, yeah, real bad. And it looked like they gave him smelling salts, and he just popped right back up and went back in.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're handling that, but yeah, Jets matchup is tough. I did a little bit more digging though, and the Jets defense has been very good. They did hold Darnold last week to QB 27, and it was a hot Darnold, right?
Yeah.
But prior to that, they faced Bo Nix in week 4. Jacoby Brissett in week 3, and Will Levis in week 2. So the competition that they've been playing has been pretty subpar. Okay. Yeah. Very, very different than Josh Allen. So I just wanted to preface that. Like I'm not necessarily saying sit him, but this is going to be a tough matchup for Josh Allen. And coming off of last week, quarterback 19, the week before, quarterback 28, this is not looking good for Allen. And I wouldn't be happy to start him No. And then my other guy is Trevor Lawrence, quarterback 10 last week. He was 371 yards and 2 touchdowns. Played really good. Unfortunately, going against the Bears D this week. And I know I talk a lot about the Bears, but you have to bring it up because Bears are one of the toughest matchups, giving up less than 8 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. And they held Andy Dalton last week to quarterback 28. So I'm excited to see what the Bears D can do against someone who had a good game last week, and it's in London, so Jaguar town, you know what I mean? So I'm putting pause on Trevor Lawrence and Josh Allen. Did you have anyone else?
The only other guy, and this is probably in leagues where it's super flex leagues or with teams on a bye, you may be scraping, but don't play Justin Herbert at Denver. That's a top 5 defense and as far as passing yards allowed per game. I think in that game, if you're in super flex league and you've got to fill a spot, I would pick up Bo Nix and start him over Justin Herbert.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the right move.
Yeah.
And then also too, I'm not too big on Baker in New Orleans this week. I don't have much to back it up, but Baker. I'm looking elsewhere. I don't think this is going to be a good matchup for him. So, all right, let's move on to green light quarterback. Shane, who do you like this week? Who you pressing the gas on?
Well, my
Shane
first
O'Mac,
guy,
shocker of the week.
And this is truly a shocker based off of my opinion, my comments, our standing bet with Coles, and that's Daniel Jones. I think there's just a lot of things going in his favor this week. Like, number one, like, he is facing the Bengals defense, who we have just seen them get torched by opposing quarterbacks. I mean, go look at the stat lines of Jayden Daniels, Andy Dalton, Lamar Jackson. They've all had huge games against him.
Lamar 348 and 4 touchdowns with 55 yards on the ground.
Throwing the ball, like, just take out the running, just even throwing what he did and what Andy Dalton did. But I was digging in a little deeper, and I'm like, this is interesting. Like, Daniel Jones, like, in 3 out of the last 4 games, he's been a top 12 quarterback. I like that he had 11 rush attempts like last week, so it's not like tentative on that knee coming off. 3 out of the last 4, he's also thrown for 2 touchdowns. So, and he had that big game last week without Malik Neighbors. So I think in this night game playing at home against the Bengals, I think he is a pretty safe bet to be over that 20-point mark.
And Neighbors should be back this week too.
Yeah, I think he will be. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that pick. He's written down on my short sheet. I do like him. I was going to mention him towards the end, but you hit it with that shocker of the week. I love it. And then my other green light quarterback of the week. This is my not shocker of the week. It's Caleb Williams. I talk about him a lot, but quarterback 6 last week. The Bears, like I said earlier, have been playing a lot better. Second game passing over 300 yards. Jaguars giving up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. It is the easiest matchup for opposing quarterbacks. They just gave up 359 yards and 3 touchdowns to Joe Flacco. So I think Caleb is going to continue this momentum that he has building, and going against a nice juicy matchup again. Hopefully, I think they have a bye week, week 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah. So going into the bye week, I think they really want to carry this momentum into the bye week, and I'm excited to see what Caleb does. He is on my green light list of the week.
Yeah, I think he has a similar week as he did last week. My other guy I had him on the red light last week, but I'm green lighting him this week, and that's Dak Prescott. I think I was pretty shocked that he threw for over 350 yards on the road against that Pittsburgh defense without Brandon Cooks. That was one of the more shocking performances I had seen. And I think we talked about this on multiple shows. Like, as good as that Lions defense is against the run, they're pretty bad against the pass. Like,
definitely.
We just saw them, before their bye week, give up almost 400 yards passing to Geno Smith. So I think this is a game where he's easily over the 300-yard mark and probably has 2 to 3 passing touchdowns.
I like it. I like how whenever you downplay Dak Prescott or have him on a red light list, he ends up outperforming, or you pick against the Cowboys and they end up playing really well. So it's nice. You're setting yourself up for no disappointment. You're happy you got the pick right, or you're happy that they played well. So
Jedi mind tricks I'm playing on my team.
And then also just want to mention, I love the matchup with Baltimore and Washington. I love Lamar and Jayden Daniels this week. I want players in that matchup. There's a couple other matchups I'll mention later on, but this one in particular, this is potential to be the game of the week, in my opinion. The Washington's playing really well, and so is Baltimore. So there's going to be a grudge match between these two similar style quarterbacks. I think it'll be really fun to watch. So I got them on. All right, let's move over to red light running back. Shane, what do you got?
So I got a couple guys. First guy is Rico Dowdle. Now, you might be thinking, people aren't starting Rico Dowdle. But listen, we've got another set of bye weeks. But Rico Dowdle has been a top 24 running back the last 2 weeks. So I think people are going to put him in their lineup. They're going to look and see what he did against that really good Pittsburgh defense and be like, I'm starting him. But like I just said, Detroit, not great against the pass. They are very good against the run. They allow the fewest rushing yards per game, and I think they're in the top 3 of fewest fantasy points allowed to running backs. Second guy is, and he was on your list last week, and I'm piling on this week, and that's Rachaad White. Going into New Orleans, who allow under 100 yards rushing a game. But more importantly, like, This split with Bucky Irving is just getting concerning now. It's getting to be like a 50-50 split. Rush-wise, they were even. White only had one more catch than Irving last week. So I think this is becoming a 50-50 shared backfield, and I don't like the matchup in New Orleans.
Yeah, and he's not doing much with his 50% share. You know what I mean? So it's like, be different if you're being productive with your 50%, but he is not. So, I agree with that. A couple running backs on my list, Chuba Hubbard. I'm not a big fan of Chuba Hubbard this week against Atlanta. He has been playing well, though. Last 3 weeks, RB12, RB8, RB5, ever since Dalton took over. So, over 97 yards and 4 receptions with a touchdown. He's been playing really, really good. So, Atlanta has given up the 4th fewest fantasy points per game and only 1 rushing touchdown in 5 games. Yep. So I'm a little worried about Chuba and this Carolina offense against Atlanta, who's been playing really, really well. So I'm sitting Chuba Hubbard. Then I'm also sitting Bijan Robinson Jr., the other B Rob.
Yeah.
At Baltimore, this is just it's obvious. Baltimore has been absolutely dominant on that side of the ball. But Bijan Robinson's been playing really well. RB13 or better in 4 to 5 games, 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. I talked about I want players in this matchup. This is the one piece I don't want is Bijan Robinson. I want everybody else, the Baltimore running attack, the pass catchers on both sides. So Bijan Robinson, definitely worried about him.
Yeah, I agree. And I saw a comment after that game on Sunday where he had said his knee was still bothering him. It was kind of surprised he even played last week, but his knee that he said was still not 100%. So if you factor that with the matchup, it's a stay away.
Yeah. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention, I know Zach Moss is dealing with an injury. He might not play, but the Giants defense has been really good lately. Last week, they held Walker to 19 yards, and they've only given up 1 touchdown in 5 games to running backs. So I'm a little worried about whoever the running back is for Cincinnati, Chase Brown or Zach Moss.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to green light running backs. Shane, what do you got?
First, I've got one guy I'm going with, and then I've got a couple DFS plays. So the first guy is David Montgomery. Now, Dallas has been better lately against the run. They've been scheming it up. Somehow, that was the other shocker to me, how they cobblestoned guys to be on that defensive line after losing Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence, and then they lost one of the replacements during the game. But still, this is a Dallas defense on the year that's given up over 130 yards per game. And I mean, if we like consistency in fantasy, there's not much more consistent than David Montgomery. He scored a rushing touchdown in every game this year. Yep. And then more importantly, I think it's 2 out of his last 3 games, he's been over 35 yards receiving. So he's getting even some little small production in the receiving game, which I like. So that's my main play. DFS guys, there's a couple of DFS guys that if you're playing, pay up for these guys. Build your pay up and build around them with cheaper guys. I'd go pay up for Breece Hall. Forget what has happened over the last 2 or 3 weeks. This Bills defense is horrible. They are giving up over 150 yards rushing a game. They are, I think, last in the NFL as far as fantasy points allowed to running backs. This is last week was a bounce back game for Garrett Wilson. This is the bounce back game for Breece Hall. And second guy similar is Josh Jacobs. Pay up for him. Arizona's bottom 5 in rushing yards allowed and giving up, I think it's 26 fantasy points to running backs.
Yeah, I love all those plays. I have Josh Jacobs on my list, David Montgomery, Breece Hall. Everybody you mentioned is definitely on my list for this week. So I love that. I got a couple other guys to mention. Talk about a bounce back, Bijan Robinson. Okay, listen. Okay, if you're deterred, just try not to be. All right, give this one more chance. Last 2 weeks, he was RB28 and RB34. He's on the verge of you almost are wishing you started someone else on your bench ahead of him. So maybe this week you're considering that. Don't. Carolina has given up the most fantasy points per game to running backs, over 27 points. Swift last week was RB2. Week 4, Chase Brown was RB5. Week 2, J.K. Dobbins was RB4. They're giving up top 5 plays for running backs. So Bijan Robinson, I expect to, just when everyone's discounting him or considering sitting him, he's going to go out there and have a big week. So keep Bijan in your lineups this week. And other than that, to pay out for also Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry needs to be paid out for in DFS against Washington. There's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. I think Derrick Henry plays well. And then lastly, I have to mention it, it's DeAndre Swift. I think DeAndre Swift has another great game against Jacksonville. So all these guys, we love Bijan, we love Jacobs, David Montgomery, Derrick Henry, Breece Hall, and DeAndre Swift. These guys have great matchups this week and should be in your starting lineup and in your DFS lineup as well.
Yeah.
So
I think with Bijan, just everyone remember, like, if you didn't watch that game, Atlanta got a bunch of longer, fluky throwing touchdowns. So he didn't really have any opportunities where Darnell Mooney breaks a tackle and scores instead of going down at the 4 or 5 yard line where then Bijan probably gets a score. So
yeah, and he's had over 60 yards in 3 games out of 5. So like he's, it's there. It's just hasn't really panned out to the way people hoped. I mean, he was a first round pick. So, all right, let's move over to wide receiver. Shane, who's your red light wide receiver this week?
Hey, I am going off of last week's theory, which panned out. I said bench Deontay Johnson, and you're going to seem like this is crazy, but bench Brian Thomas Jr. This week playing the Bears. I think
bear down.
Yeah, I think this is like we're going to see probably. You can correct me if I'm wrong, since you've seen more, but I don't think Jalen Johnson travels to the slot position a lot where Christian Kirk will be. So I think he mostly stays outside. And so if he stays outside, like, of course they're going to put him on the Jags' best playmaker, and that's Brian Thomas. And I just think that they're going to slow him down. You had mentioned that they held Dalton to, I think it was under 150 yards throwing. Johnson only had like 3 catches for 22 yards. I think this is a down game for Brian Thomas Jr. And then my second guy I've got is, people are still starting him, but I think it's time to bench him, is Amari Cooper. I think this is just a similar setup for the Browns on the road again that we saw last week against Washington, where they've got limited scoring opportunities in that game. If you take out that week 3 game when he was, I think, a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, like his wide receiver finishes were like in the 70s and the high 50s and in the 40s. It's just been awful for him.
Yeah, Cooper, it's just I was so close to putting him on a green light this week because Philadelphia's defense is terrible, but you just can't have much faith in the Browns. Like, I'm not green lighting any Browns. Like, they're just not – it's just not happening. So, yeah, Cooper is in for some trouble. I love the Brian Thomas Jr. pick. He's on my list as well. Oh. And, no, Jalen Johnson I don't think travels with the slot too much. But Brisker is not going to be traveling with the team, dealing with that injury, so he's not going to be playing next week. But we still got Byard and the boys, so should be good. My other pick is Michael Pittman at Tennessee. Tennessee is the worst matchup right now.
Yes.
Shocking. It's so weird. Mm-hmm. They are the best defense right now. It is insane. I think they're only giving up giving up the fewest yards and the only team not to give up a touchdown to wide receiver. 0 touchdowns to wide receivers. So Richardson is likely to return. I hope he doesn't, but especially if he does, you can't play Pittman. But even with footsteps Flacco, I wouldn't have him in my lineup. So, those are my red light picks. And then also, I'm not too keen on Sutton against the Chargers. Chargers defense is really good, and Garrett Wilson. I think he's going to have a tough game or a tough matchup against Buffalo. So I just don't like that game. I don't like the the Jets game for fantasy betting wise. I think it's an under game. And, I know Breece Hall should have a good game, but overall, just across the board, it's going to be heavy defense for the passing game.
Yeah.
All right, Shane, what do you got for green light wide receivers week 6?
So if I love Daniel Jones, which I do, I'm going to take the secondary piece in that game because everyone's going to be starting Malik Neighbors, but I'm just going to I'd fire up Wan'Dale Robinson. This is a guy that's been, he's been a top 20 fantasy receiver last 2 weeks in a row. He's getting good target volumes. He's had averaging like 10 targets a game over his last 3 games. So, and if Neighbors comes back, it doesn't hurt him. He's produced with him in PPR leagues. He gets enough targets and enough of those short area targets to just rack up a lot of catches that he can probably consistently be in that top 24, top 30 receivers each week. Then my second guy real quick, and then is I'm going to go with Stefon Diggs playing at New England. I think for sure Nico Collins will miss this game. I haven't seen too many guys hurt their hamstring a game, can't come back, and then are ready to go the next week. So I think Diggs was already he had a low ADOT, which is great for PPR leagues. I think he'll play in the slot, so he'll avoid Christian Gonzalez. And I was kind of surprised to see when I was looking up. I mean, he's had 2 top 15 finishes in his last 3 games, even with Nico Collins. So I think this New England defense, they are like bottom 5 in the league in passing yards allowed. I think Diggs gets you a pretty good game this week.
I love that. I love the Diggs and Wan'Dale picks. Those make a lot of sense to me. A lot of sense. I got a couple wide receivers here that kind of correlate with my quarterbacks that I like this week, or that I've mentioned, is Terry McLaurin at Baltimore. Love Terry McLaurin. DJ Moore against Jacksonville. Love DJ Moore, obviously. The guy's been a stud lately, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. But Zay Flowers also versus Washington. Now, I know Baltimore's passing attack has just been, unreliable or inconsistent, but I think Zay Flowers, wide receiver 11 last week, 12 targets, 111 yards, over 10 targets in 3 out of 5 games. So I think this is where we see a big Zay Flowers game against Washington. And McLaurin, it's pretty obvious. Terry McLaurin is awesome. Terry McLaurin is awesome. And he's going to, put up a big game. We just saw Jamar Chase just absolutely torch the Baltimore Ravens. So I love those guys.
And Terry should have had a touchdown last week.
He should have. Yes, definitely should have had a touchdown last week.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to red light tight ends. Who do you not like this week? Who are you pumping the brakes on?
Gosh, I hate to do this. It's just like piling on, and especially since I own him in so many leagues, but I'm going to keep putting him here. And maybe for you managers, it worked last week. I put Kyle Pitts on there, and he bounced back for 15 PPR points. So maybe it pans out for all you Dalton Kincaid managers, including myself. But I'm putting him on here until we see it. I was so disappointed last week. I thought with Khalil Shakir out, this is the game. We're going to see something from Kincaid. And instead, he caught 2 freaking balls to finish outside the top 20 again at the position. So matchup is not great. If I'm a little down on Josh Allen, I'm a little down on the pass catcher. So it's red lighting Dalton Kincaid.
2 freaking balls.
2 with no Khalil Shakir.
Yeah, I know that's tough. But it was a tough matchup, and he's got another tough matchup this week. So I understand where you're coming from, and it pains me to see it every week. I just had so much faith in Dalton Kincaid. And false hope, it looks like. So hopefully he turns it around, and hopefully this week you are wrong. Hopefully. My red light tight end of the week is Isaiah Likely going against Washington. Big week last week, catching 2 touchdowns. But without those 2 touchdowns, he would have been pretty irrelevant. Like I said before when I was talking about Zay Flowers, is this Ravens passing attack has been very inconsistent and hard to gauge. So I'm afraid that Likely is going to be quiet in this game against Washington. Washington's quietly allowing the 4th fewest yards to tight ends. Mm-hmm. So they've been really good in the NFL at defending tight ends, and I'm afraid Likely is going to be on the bench this week. And then David Njoku's dealing with that injury, but even if he plays, I don't like him against Philly.
Yeah, and then we also saw Charlie Kolar involved in the tight end landscape for that team, which was really weird.
Yeah, it's all a big mess. So, who do you like this week, Shane? Who's on your green light pumping?
So my main guy, then I'll give you a cheap DFS play. So my main guy is Jake Ferguson. I think, man, with Brandon Cooks on the IR, I feel like he's going to be the number 2 pass receiving option most weeks. I know Jalen Tolbert had a good game last week. But ever since he returned from that 1-game absence from his knee injury, like he's gotten over 25 targets and he's been over 70 yards in 2 of the last 3 games. I think it's just a matter of time before we see the score from him. Like we see a touchdown, which hasn't happened yet. And then like a real cheap, could be a pickup play or a real cheap DFS play is Cade Otton. And so for me, when I'm streaming tight ends or looking for a cheap option, like I'm going to probably look at targets and the tight end landscape that we are in today's world. Like Otton's got 8 or more targets in 2 out of his last 3 games. He gets the Saints this week, which they're okay against tight ends. They allow, I think it's 12 fantasy points per game. But another reason I like him in maybe redraft leagues is then you could hold on to him for another week because next week he gets the Ravens, who's one of the worst teams facing tight ends this year.
Okay, I like it. Cade Otton, throwing it out there. So the mini Shane O'Mac shocker of the week. My green light, Kyle Pitts. I whiffed on him in previous weeks, but after putting up a goose egg in week 4, he just bounced back with 7 for 88. We saw it. You mentioned it. Top 10. He's actually been a top 10 tight end in 3 out of the last 5 games. So kind of, interesting. I think against Carolina, they're giving up the 5th most points to tight ends. So I'm excited to see what Kyle Pitts can do after a promising week last week. So hopefully that doesn't burn me. Seems like every time you're in on Pitts, he does bad. And every time you're out on Pitts, he does good. It's just one of those teeter-totter things.
Yeah.
And then I got a cheap play just like you, Zach Ertz.
Oh, yeah.
At Baltimore.
Yep.
Ertz last week had his worst week. But what I'm looking at is he still had 8 targets.
Yep.
So I'm really excited to see what he can do. Baltimore giving up the 2nd most yards to tight ends. So really excited about that. But yeah, I think that's about it. That is our red light, green light for week 6. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Podcast available on all platforms. You guys are the best. Buckle up.